Okay, this is the English version. This house in the background is called a Hasi. It's a former like office building for the port that is here. You can't see it here, but there's actually a river right behind this buildings. And there used to be a train track down here that took freight and whatever to the port on the river. And for the last year and a half or so, or 2 years now, I forget, this house has been occupied, this old administrative house. It was abandoned, and it was occupied by young people who wanted it to be a cultural center. And it's owned by the city. Has a couple of its own how do you say that, housing firms, public housing firms, basically, except public housing has such a negative connotation for Americans. But anyway, they actually own this building, have done nothing with it. And like so many buildings in the city hall, they're just waiting for it to rot enough so that someone, either through arson burns it down or gets so rotten so they can sell it and on this nice valuable piece of real estate, or they can build something ugly, which in this case is right next door. Look at this gem. This is called Sophienhofen. It's the Sophie Harbor, and again, right there, you can't see it, but there are trees, and they're letting this little, it's sort of like a peninsula or an island in the river, and they're letting developers develop it. And this is the kind of absolute ugly, what else can you call it? It's just shit. And as always, we have the problem with vocabulary. Shit is something useful and helpful. This is more like, this certainly looks like the many World War II bunkers that are still hanging around in Germany and Berlin and elsewhere, these big things of concrete. And this is supposed to, and the city wants to become known as the city on the river. They want being on the river, coming for river tourism to be something. And of course, their idea, I guess, is by building a big gray ugly bunkers that somehow that will make the river more attractive. Later on, I'll get some views from the other side of the river. But if you think that this building is right on the river, it's crazy. And then also it has to do with voyeurism, which is something to do with so-called contemporary architecture, where they are the ugly, hideous voyeur looking at beauty, and the other people have to look at them. And so they're building this klutz, yet they're complaining about and fighting against, and the city council won't support young people being in this building trying to build a cultural center. So when you see stuff like this, just in total, you got to say, even though I love the city and I live here, it's a really stupid city in terms of who manages it and the way they manage it. They are about as clueless as you can get. But it also creates, now and then, a little bit of amusement, though this is not amusing.